Hello everyone, GoldenNova here. Folks, I knew this day would come. The Terminal World Pack promises a new era of lore cards, expanding on one of the game's longest running stories. We've seen updates to Infernoids, Ritual Beasts, and Ice Barrier, and with Tierra's minions making a comeback, a new age of conflict is on the horizon. But we've covered all those themes before, leaving us with just one theme that I have hatred's not the right word for it. Ojamas take that spot readily. It's more of a smoldering indifference, a theme that takes the aimless meandering of the other early Duel Terminal themes and cranks it up to 11, somehow turning the concept of being pack filler into an Olympic sport. Premiering in the May 2010 core set The Shining Darkness before seeing its full release in Hidden Arsenal 2, Gen-X are a species of interesting creatures. While seemingly made of metal and operating like robots, they're actually stewards of the planet generated by the planet. While compatible with machinery, as evidenced not only by many of them being machine types as well as their integration with the ally of Justice monsters, they actually are living, breathing creatures, as evidenced by some of them being spellcasters, rocks, and pyros. Though, since we've pretty much established that all of this is taking place inside an honest-to-goodness Duel Terminal cabinet, it makes sense that their appearances would take after the parts of those machines. In the paper game, Gen-X would cover many different playstyles, from attribute matter shenanigans to synchro spamming, and while isolated pockets of cards would see play in other decks, as a whole, they very rarely found competitive success, though that didn't stop them from accruing a wealth of fans in the process. Like Nash. Say hi, Nash.
Hi, Nash.
Cheeky. Which is why it was so surprising that they got some of the most busted support out of the Terminal World update, likely to overcorrect for just how banal the theme is. So let's get into the shop to see what parts we're working with, have Nash show us what our newly tuned pieces of tech can do, then see if any other warriors of the planet want to pitch in. It's time to learn about Generation Next with Gen-X Explained. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons and the fine people over at Dragon Shield. If you want to protect your cards with the strongest scales on the market that even come with their own lore while supporting the channel, use my affiliate link in the description. So, what's the deal with Gen-X? Well, they're a series of, well, everything. Many early cards revolve around Gen-X controllers specifically, so it might be best to go over the story of the Gen-X, especially to help you understand why there are 3 different categories of them. As stated previously, the Gen-X are spawned by the planet to help care for its environments, seemingly popping up out of nowhere. They had existed beforehand, but after the worms began invading, the Gen-X made themselves known, helping to clean up the world in the wake of their otherworldly terraforming. This also manifested as them throwing themselves headfirst into battle, and they were not built for combat. So the 4 tribes, combined under the banner of the Ally of Justice, examined and learned more about these strange creatures, eventually creating the artificial Gen-X controller to help communicate with them. But it didn't just help them talk. Controller would actively improve the Gen-X's fighting capabilities, making them more suited to actual combat. This would lead to controllers being mass-produced, and even being used as control centers for the massive Ally of Justice war machines to keep their operations in order. Eventually, Justice would create a new power source for the Gen-X, the Real Fusion Reactor, and would be installed in every compatible Gen-X they could get their hands on. This improved their power output immensely, and so this generation of Gen-X became known as the R-Genex. And even further down the line, when the worms were dealt with and the fabled loomed large over the world, the weapons meant to fight against the sneaky, stealthy worms were converted to assist the Gen-X, thus creating their up till this point final form, the Gen-X Allies. While great in power and number, the Gen-X would nevertheless not make an appearance past age 1.0, except as corpses puppeteered by the evil swarm. The initial batch focuses on fielding Gen-X controller, deploying it to use as synchro material for a variety of synchro monsters. The R-Genex cards help to accelerate this process, while the Gen-X Ally focus a lot more on the attributes matter sub-theme that the original Gen-X cards had, either as a way to update your non-tuner material to make those older synchro monsters, or as a way to set up the conditions to activate a number of powerful effects depending on your different attributes, which is rough when most of your monsters are only a single attribute. Alright, that's the backstory out of the way. Let's begin by talking about the original Gen.X, and there's no better place to start with than Gen.X Controller, a level 3 Dark Machine normal tuner monster with 1400 attack and 1200 defense. As a master of all powers and elements, this is one of the few Gen.X monsters that can communicate with its companions. That's some pretty boisterous flavor text for such a tiny creature, but not entirely without merit. It's the centerpiece of an entire deck and will end up crewing massive machines of war before its story is done. It's even got its own master duel mate. But goddamn does this art really show off what it means to be Gen.X Controller. The sadness, living as a tool for others, only ever using their talents at connecting to bring more warfare. You know, the worms were obviously pretty bad, but justice wasn't exactly a charitable foundation either. Gen.X Power Planner is a level 1 light spellcaster monster with 300 attack and 200 defense, making this an unofficial Karibo. When this card is normal summoned, you can add a level 3 Gen.X effect monster from your deck to your hand. This is an effect that we're going to be seeing a lot of moving forward. It turns out Gen.X's have a lot of Stratoses, but only on normal summon, and only for very specific Gen.X, which is a design idea the developers really latched onto in the latest wave of support. In fact, you could say they planned on them having a lot of power. Okay, jokes aside, can we get a containment field around that unprotected orb of dark matter? Gen.X Recycled is a level 1 Dark Machine tuner monster with 200 attack and 400 defense, and once per turn, you can select a Gen.X monster in your grave, and until the end phase, this card's name is treated as the selected monster's name. And you'll almost always be picking Gen.X Controller because it's the only name that actually matters here. If it copied things like types or attributes, that'd be one thing, but at this point, Recycled might as well just have an effect that says treat this card as Gen.X Controller for all it's worth. Being a level 1 though does have its perks, giving you different options when it comes to performing your synchro summons. And where you could use unexpected die to get controller onto the board, Recycled can be fielded with 1-for-1. You can even hit it with that sweet machine duplication for even more tuners. That may seem a bit excessive, but when it comes to recycling, it's really all about getting the most out of the material. Gen.X Undyne is a level 3 water aqua monster with 1200 attack and 600 defense, and when this card is normal summoned, you can send a water monster from your deck to the grave to add a Gen.X Controller from your deck to your hand. If you've played the game for long enough, you'll actually recognize this as having had some level of tournament play. Mermail decks would actually play this as one of their normal summons because sending the water monster from deck to grave was a cost. And since a lot of Atlantean monster effects triggered after doing exactly that, this was basically a toolbox for whatever you fancied. You even got a helpful little normal tuner to use for a variety of plays. It did come with the risk of hard drawing it, as it would make Undyne useless, and would be replaced by Neptibus when it came out for basically doing its job but better. Sometimes you'd see this hopping around in frogs as another way to bin the little freaks, but it wasn't particularly popular. But that hasn't stopped it from being fondly remembered in the eyes of many players, and its impact has been so profound, it's had an influence on things even outside of Yu-Gi-Oh!, including being the basis of the best character in Undertale. Gen.X Spare is a level 3 Dark Machine tuner monster with 800 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn, if you control another Gen.X monster, you can make this card's name Gen.X Controller until the end phase. See, when I said they were mass-produced, I wasn't kidding. They made a lot of these kind of effects. Calling it a spare is a little mean, but to be fair, Justice didn't do much better. Spare is the specific Gen.X controller that piloted the mighty ally of Justice Field Marshal, but fell in battle after defeating many of the worms. And without the necessary parts to fix it, Spare was left behind, giving the original Gen.X controller a gift of hope, as seen in the artwork for Final Gesture. Oh, that's not fair. I was going into this really disliking Gen.X. You can't make me care about them like this! Gen.X Doctor is a level 3 Dark Spellcaster monster with 1500 attack and 1000 defense, and you contribute a face-up Gen.X controller to select and destroy a card on the field. Well, that puts a bit of a sinister spin on it. It's not helping at all, it's turning controllers into little missiles. It's even got one of them in the trademark Itachi chokehold. I'm starting to think they don't make their Gen.X Doctors swear a Hippocratic oath. Gen.X Gaia is a level 3 Earth Rock monster with 1000 attack and 1900 defense, and if this card would be destroyed, you can destroy a Gen.X controller you control instead. I'm not sure why you would have a copy of both of these on the board and not sync with them, or overlay them, or heck, even link summon with them. Maybe if you summon them both on your opponent's turn, this would have some application? Maybe there's a limited format usage? I don't know. Maybe it's because we haven't gotten all that weird rock shell off of it yet. Or maybe it needs the Wi-Fi password so we can get Gaia online. Gen.X Worker is a level 3 wind machine monster with 1200 attack and defense, and you contribute this card to special summon a Gen.X monster from your hand. We do have exactly one high-level Gen-X we'd want to use this with, so being able to drop it out of your hand for free isn't terrible, but because a majority of our monsters are level 4 or lower, this card only really helps if you summon it for free off of some other effect to get another Gen-X out of your hand. Kinda like an early Fire Flint Lady. You never know what the future may hold, but for now, this card certainly isn't putting in the work. Gen-X Neutron is a level 4 light machine monster with 1800 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn, during the end phase, if this card was normal summoned this turn, you can add a machine type tuner monster from your deck to your hand. This is another member of the theme that escaped containment and found its way into other decks, because it turns out machine is one of the most popular types when it comes to tuners. Yeah, you could grab Gen-X Controller or one of its many siblings, or you could get a whole bunch of different Karakuris, Quick Draw Synchron, Black Salvo for crying out loud. It's an effect that only gets better with age, though the end phase search is certainly holding it back. Unlike more modern designs like Magnamut, this monster has to stay on the field through the end phase, but at least they gave it an 1800 attack body so it could hold the line after the search. Now that's a brain blast. Gen-X Blast Fan is a level 4 wind spellcaster monster with 1600 attack and 1300 defense, and when this card is special summoned, you can add a dark Gen-X monster from your deck to your hand. And this one is the unexpected combo enabler of the group. Remember Worker from a bit ago? Well, that actually gets this effect online, grabbing us Controller among other monsters. But where it really shines is in Wind decks combined with Divine Wind of Mist Valley. You might remember us covering this in the Mist Valley episode, but this can be special summoned off that effect, which can fetch you a card like Gen-X Ally Birdman, we'll get to them later, to enable all kinds of synchro shenanigans. It does take a bit of work, but their payoff is well worth it. So if you see it, make sure you pick it up, especially if you see it in a draft. Gen-X Turbine is a level 4 Earth monster with 1400 attack and 1300 defense, and while on the field, all face-up Gen-X monsters you control gain 400 attack. Actually kinda cool. It doesn't exclude itself, so that means it's functionally an 1800 attack monster with a slight weakness to effect negation, and makes all of our monsters a lot better. 400 points really can change something from a chump to a champ, and while it's not doing anything flashy, at least it's doing something, which is more than I can say for some of these things. But what's really grabbing my attention is the Bond Pirate style logo on here. Was Duel Terminal secretly Mega Man Legends the whole time and nobody told me? Because if so, I can see why I like it so much. Gen-X Searcher is a level 4 Earth Machine monster with 1600 attack and 400 defense, and when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a Gen-X monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck in face-up attack position, which gives us a total of 21 targets to choose from. You can get Turbine for the power boost, Worker for the free hand to summon, R-Genex Accelerator to beef up your Gen-X search effects, or the Doctor if you're British. But looking at it just makes me feel bad, you know? I want to go over there and give it a fix-up, but I know it's just going to get run over by a monster anyway, so I guess it's best to keep it as is. Gen-X Furnace is a level 5 Fire Pyro monster with 2000 attack and 1300 defense, and if you control a face-up Gen-X controller, you can normal summon this card without tributing, which will give you all the material you need to make some sweet level 8 synchros, or a level 6 if you have recycled take on the name. But using your normal summon on it seems pretty rough. I know there are some synchros that need controller as a tuner, you can't really get around that, but you might have already used your normal summon to get that controller on the board. Isn't there any better level 5 material to help out with this? I mean, we still have Instant Fusion, or better yet, Ready Fusion, both of which would smell good cooking over Furnace's succulent flames. God damn it, now I'm hungry. Gen-X Army is a level 6 Earth Machine monster with 2300 attack and 1300 defense, and when this card is tribute summoned by attributing a Gen-X monster, you can destroy a card your opponent controls. Hey, check it out, it's the Gen-X Monarch card! Specifically a version of Zaborg, though there are some minor differences. Zaborg is a little stronger in the attack department, but Army doesn't target, keeping your opponent guessing all through resolution. It's also a stark reminder of what Justice really does to the Gen-X. Many of them still retain their connections to the planet, but Army shows us what happens when they really want to make one ready for war. At least for now. The Gen-X allies feel a bit more family friendly, but it is hard to keep up the good guy act when your frontline soldiers look like the Terminator. Are we the baddies? Gen-X Solar is a level 7 light machine monster with 2500 attack and 1500 defense, and you can normal summon this card by tributing a single Gen-X monster. And you burn your opponent for 500 damage each time a face-up Gen-X monster you control is sent to the grave. This is actually kinda cool. A big body that lets you deal a lot of passive damage as you use Gen-X as material for other summons. And while that's been a little slow during its initial run, let's just say things are about to go into overdrive. And, bonus, it won't even increase your carbon footprint. Now that's what I call solar power. That does it for our regular Gen X main deck monsters. Let's pop on over and see what the extra deck has to offer. GoldenNova is a level 6 Earth Machine Synchro monster with 1800 attack and 2800 defense, requiring Gen X controller and one or more non-tuner Earth monsters as material. Once per turn, if you control any number of face-up level 4 or lower Gen X monsters, you can switch the original attack and defense of this card until the end phase, for as long as you control any number of face-up level 4 or lower Gen X monsters. This means it can swing in for 2800, a very respectable amount, especially on a monster that size. But since it only lasts until the end phase, you'll be left holding the bag on an 1800 attack monster, which is just begging your opponent to run it over with anything with just above average combat capabilities. If this were quick effect, or even if it turned to defense position after attacking like Dante, I could see the value in this being a robust if clunky attacker, but as it stands now, I wouldn't encourage Geo cashing this one in. R-Genex is a level 6 water machine synchro monster with 2300 attack and 1800 defense, requiring Gen X controller and one or more non-tuner water monsters as material. When this card destroys an opponent's monster by a battle and sends it to the grave, you gain life points equal to the attack the destroyed monster had. So that's something. I don't want to discount a card that can gain you such a huge chunk of life points, especially when time is such an important factor in games nowadays, but locking that behind having to win a battle isn't ideal. Like, I have the choice between synchro summoning this or Coral Dragon, which has a slew of effects and utility. So unless we absolutely need to make a level 6 Gen X synchro monster that is water specifically, this model is going to be hydrover-looked. Windmill Gen X is a level 7 wind machine synchro monster with 2000 attack and 1600 defense, requiring Gen X controller and one or more non-tuner wind monsters as material. This card gains 300 attack for each face down spell and trap card on the field, and you can send a card from your hand to the grave to select and destroy a face down spell or trap card on the field. It is so wild that this non-bows with itself. This does benefit from your opponent's set back row, but by destroying them, you make Windmill that much less threatening. Granted, you don't need very many, having 2 of your own back row puts this at a respectable 2600, but then you have to keep them set to sustain the attack boost, and you didn't put Book of Moon in your deck to not mess with your opponent's plays. This currently has the best prospects of all the Gen X synchros we've covered so far, but I wouldn't count on that lasting for long, considering which way the wind is blowing. Thermal Gen X is a level 8 fire machine monster with 2400 attack and 1200 defense, requiring Gen X controller and one or more fire non-tuner monsters as material. This card gains 200 attack for each fire monster in your grave, and if this card destroys a monster by battle, inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each Gen X monster in your grave. So that means the more fire Gen X you get into the grave, the better. But spoilers, there's only 3 of those, including itself, so you'll likely want to tech in a lot of fire monsters if you want to take full advantage of this effect. Granted though, this can cause a lot of damage. It'll be at least 2600 if we factor in the non-tuner material, and the amount of Gen X we can get into the grave is not insignificant. Keep this in mind as a surprise game ender, and also for when you need to get rid of a lot of propane very quickly. And here I thought this was supposed to be good for the environment. It looks like we're doing the Hank Hill maneuver here. Arms of Gen X Return 0 is a level 10 Dark Machine Synchro monster with 3100 attack and 2950 defense, requiring a Dark Tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. When your opponent activates a monster effect as a quick effect, you can banish a monster from your grave with the same attribute as that monster, but a different one than those banished to activate the effects of Arms of Gen X Return 0 this turn, to negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. And once per turn, you can target up to 6 of your Gen X monsters with different attributes that are banished and or are in your grave, shuffle them into the deck, then you can destroy up to that many cards in the spell and trap zone. So, quick lore tangent, this may look like Ally of Justice Decisive Armor, but it's actually a combo of it and Field Marshal. Turns out the strange attack stat is the combination of both those monster stats after you cut them in half, which is doubly cool since both of those Ally of Justice machines were piloted by Gen X monsters. Big thanks to the editor of this card's trivia page on Yugipedia, I never would have figured that out. And look, it's even powered by a number of real fusion reactors. This has been likened to the access code talker of negates, and if you put the effects side by side, you can start to see why. But it is a mite difficult to use. While this does reward you for playing a wide range of attributes, you'll have to load them all into your grave, and if there's any gap in that net, your opponent's gonna know about it. It's kinda like if Access Code Talker's effect worked exactly the same way, but it could only pop monsters who match the attribute of the Link monster you banished. It also isn't too strong against mono attribute decks because they can more than likely push through the single negate and go on their merry way. However, with extra decks being as diverse as they are, that's not always going to be the case. It remains to be seen if this will overtake Barone as the level 10 negation synchro of choice, a decision heavily influenced by each individual deck's makeup, but if this gets off the ground, your opponent's game plan won't stand a chance, because you'll be Gen X armed to the teeth. That was one of our new Terminal World cards, and this next one is the big reason why we're here. The reason why you now have to keep Gen X in mind, because this card has a huge potential for making some truly outrageous plays. Presenting Repaired Gen X Controller, a Link 1 Dark Machine monster with 1200 attack, requiring any level 4 or lower Gen X monster as material, and you can only special summon copies of this card once per turn. If this card is Link summoned, you can add a Gen X monster from your grave to your hand. And once per chain, if any number of Gen X monsters are added to your hand except by drawing them, you can, except during the damage step, immediately after this effect resolves, normal summon a Gen X monster. Also, you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn, except by synchro summon using a Gen X tuner as material. Now that might seem pretty tame on the surface, you get a search, you get a normal summon, that's not too far off of what the deck can already do. For instance, we have R-Genex Accelerator. It's a level 4 Wind Machine monster with 1500 attack and 1900 defense, and when a Gen X monster is added from your deck to your hand, you can reveal it to special summon it. At the end of the day, that's pretty similar. But it doesn't do it in the same way, and that's where things start to get goofy. Remember Power Planer gets you a level 3 Gen X effect monster on normal summon from your deck, and how I said there would be others like it? Well, let's check those out real quick. R-Genex Magma is a level 3 Fire Pyro monster with 1000 attack and 200 defense, and when normal summoned, you can add a level 2 R-Genex monster from your deck to your hand. R-Genex Crusher is a level 2 Earth Machine monster with 800 attack and defense, and when normal summoned, you can add a level 4 R-Genex monster from your deck to your hand. And R-Genex Turbo is a level 4 Wind Machine monster with 1500 attack and 1300 defense, and when normal summoned, you can add a level 1 Gen X monster from your deck to your hand. And what's one of those targets? That's right! Gen X Power Planer, which means we have ourselves a closed loop. Level 1 gets 3, 3 gets 2, 2 gets 4, 4 gets 1. But by themselves, that doesn't do very much. You're locked into only synchro summoning, and you have to use Gen X tuners to do it. But all of them come with a Gen X tuner that they can search off their own effect. Planner can get you Spare, Magma can get Overseer, Crusher can get R-Genex Undyne, which can itself become a tuner, and Turbo can get Recycled. So not only do any of the core 4 in this loop enable all of these shenanigans, as they're all valid Link material, they each have an off-ramp that you can use to take advantage of, and I cannot stress this enough, any synchro, just so long as you use one of our on-theme tuners. And you'd think at this point we would stop, because you have to stop summoning at some point. We only have so much room for monsters. But remember that this triggers off of any Gen X monster being added to your hand in any way, except by drawing. And while it's once per chain, it is not once per turn, meaning that these effects can reactivate this loop once you've cleared out some room. This means you can use cards like Monster Reincarnation to add a Gen X from your grave to your hand, and R-Genex Undyne has a grave effect that'll do this as well, which you can set up pretty easily with regular Undyne. Or my personal favorite, Gen X Ally Birdman, which adds a card from your field to your hand to summon it. And if that added monster was a Gen X, you can start the whole process over again if you add back a member of the loop. It's even a tuner, so you don't even have to worry about searching another for this loop. In fact, Power Planner can grab this as a way to keep the loop going if you already have the requisite monsters in your hand to keep the loop going. And you could potentially do this multiple times in a single turn, because now Gen X Ally Birdman is unlimited. Just imagine the kind of goofball maneuvers you can get up to once you field a monster like TG Hyper Librarian. Now, that being said, this combo doesn't have any form of protection, and while none of the members of the loop are bricks, remember that each one represents the ability to start it, you are filling your deck up with combo pieces, which means you might not have the room for the non-engine cards that you need to compete nowadays. But those are just limitations that skilled duelists can work around, so don't underestimate them. Repaired Gen X Controller may be partly made of Gen X Spare, but you can count on it never taking the chance to spare you. Alright, that does it for all of our basic Gen X monsters. Let's move on to the ones that have integrated the real fusion reactor, the R-Genex. R-Genex Oracle is a level 1 Dark Spellcaster tuner monster with 300 attack and defense, and if this card is added from your deck to your hand by the effect of a Gen X monster, you can special summon this card. Oracle also can't be used as synchro material except for the synchro of a Gen X monster. So remember R-Genex Turbo? Yeah, you can just search this with that monster and get yourself a free level 1 tuner on board. Though you're gonna need a bit of an established board to work with this because, as it turns out, there are no level 5 Gen X Synchro monsters at time of recording. Now, if it was a real Oracle, it would have suggested one be made before this, or even have gotten a level or two to work with existing monsters, but I guess its power of prognostication is still in beta. But it did at least have the foresight to get a new backpack. This looks like Power Planner, but after they've integrated the real fusion reactor, which means that boiling orb of dark matter is now packed safely inside a big lunchbox. A lunchbox that's easily 6 times Oracle size. Seriously, what is that thing's lifting capacity? R-Genex Overseer is a level 2 Dark Spellcaster tuner monster with 200 attack and 100 defense, and when this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon a level 3 or lower Gen X monster from your hand. Sadly, Blast Fan is level 4, so it's not a vector for triggering that effect. In fact, even if you summon a level 3, you have a similar issue to Oracle where there aren't any level 5 Gen X synchros to work with. Or below that for that matter. Though thankfully you can branch out into other synchros with this monster, which means Overseer didn't make the same kind of oversight. R-Genex Turing is a level 2 Dark Spellcaster tuner monster with 600 attack and defense, and during your opponent's turn, as a quick effect, if you control a Gen X monster, you can special summon this monster from your hand. Then immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon a Gen X synchro monster. And if this card on the field is used as material for the synchro summon of a Gen X monster, it can be treated as level 1 or 3. Honestly, this is pretty cool, as quick syncing has the potential for powerful interruptions. But that depends on the quality of the synchros we can go into, and this is currently sparse. First off, the ones needing Gen X controller will be difficult to summon. Note that you don't have to sync using Turing, but you will need to have controller on board beforehand to make this work. Otherwise, Return 0 is always a good option, Vindicate is a great blocker, and Locomotion can steal a monster. Careful though, Locomotion can miss timing, so you'll have to be careful about how you utilize it, which is a little something I like to call the Turing test. R-Genex Undyne is a level 4 Water Aqua monster with 1700 attack and 1100 defense, and once per turn you can banish a Gen X monster from your grave, and this card gains that monster's attribute. Then, if you banished a tuner monster, Undyne can be treated as a tuner for the turn. If you control a Gen X Synchro monster, you can target 2 Gen X monsters in your grave, including this card, to add them to your hand, and for the rest of the turn, banish any card sent to your grave. A restriction that's in place, I assume, because that effect is not once per turn, and it's not even that big of a drawback. Like, sure, future R Undynes during that turn aren't going to go to the graveyard, but any that are already in there can still add cards back to your hand, and any banished ones can be recycled by Return 0. And because you're adding cards to your hand, that represents a repaired Gen X controller trigger. This is another big step forward for Gen X. In fact, you could say that it's the real deal. R-Genex Ultimum is a level 4 Earth Machine monster with 1800 attack and 1400 defense, and when this face-up card on the field is destroyed and sent to the grave, you can select 2 Gen X monsters in your grave and return them to the deck. Dang, if only it put the cards back into your hand. It wasn't very good beforehand, but now it actively takes monsters out of your graveyard that Return 0 could use, so I wouldn't even bother talking about it. Ultimum's the word, as they say. Next up, we've got a couple of R-Genex Synchro monsters. Vindicate R-Genex is a level 8 Wind Machine Synchro monster with 2400 attack and 1000 defense, so, Monarch stats? Requiring a Gen X tuner and 1 or more non-tuner wind monsters as material. Your opponent can't target this card for attacks, and if this card destroys a monster by battle, you can add a Gen X monster from your deck to your hand. This is actually not too bad. This can pretty effectively keep your opponent's monsters off your life points all by itself, because it can be targeted for attacks, but also doesn't allow your opponent to attack directly, which is kinda rare, and also grabs you cards when it wins in battle. It's just a shame that it needs wind monsters to function. While you can take a Windmill Gen X and plug it into a recycled Gen X or Turing, the wind pool for non-tuners is pretty sparse. Here's hoping this new wave of support has a way to cheat out Gen X synchros from the extra deck so that we can get some vindication for Vindicate. Locomotion R-Genex is a level 9 Dark Machine Synchro monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, requiring a Gen X tuner and 1 or more Dark non-tuner monsters as material. And when synchro summoned, take control of the face-up monster your opponent controls with the highest level, your choice if tied. It doesn't target, and it is permanent, which is pretty wild as far as stealing effects go. It does basically whiff off of Xyz and Link monsters, but when it comes to monsters with levels, the bigger usually means the better. And thankfully, Dark is an attribute that you can count on seeing more often than not, especially but you can tell at
Gen
this
X.
point that
So this
Justice
isn't
was
half
really
bad.
running
And,
out of
like
ideas.
I mentioned earlier,
I don't want to call
works
this a
really
really
well
well
with
with
palette
Turing as
swap,
a way to steal a
but after
monster
the second
during
controller
your
mounted
opponent's
fire
turn,
cannon,
either
where
by
do you
stealing
go
their
from
payoff or interrupting their plays altogether. Regardless, it is still a sin against God. I mean, a train That's not an Earth machine? Scandalous. Now we make our way to our last group of monsters, which integrates the Ally of Justice with the Gen-X for the appropriately named Gen-X Allies. Gen-X Ally Chemisterer is a level 2 Dark Machine Tuner monster with 200 attack and 500 defense, and as a quick effect, you can discard this card, declare an attribute, and target a Gen-X monster you control, and that monster becomes that attribute. This is a good introduction to what Gen-X allies really care about: attributes. Perhaps maybe as an extension of the unity the tribes have at this point in the story. It also helps make your Gen-X the appropriate attribute for synchro summons, but going -1 to accomplish that is pretty bad. And to top it all off, the name sucks to say. Chemisterer? Ugh, that's a mouthful. Gen-X Ally Solid is a level 2 Dark Machine monster with 500 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn you can send a face-up Water Gen-X monster you control to the grave to draw 2 cards. Currently, this only works on 3 monsters, the Undynes and Hydra, so you're gonna need an attribute changing effect to tag one of your Gen-X's into a water. But turning those monsters into Pot of Greed isn't that bad. At least, you know, on paper. You also have to account for getting the monster onto the field and the work it takes to change the attribute if you're not using Undynes. I mean, it's pretty alluring, but at this point, you might as well just play Allure. Gen-X Ally Changer is a level 3 Dark Machine monster with 1200 attack and 1800 defense, and once per turn you can target a face-up monster on the field and declare an attribute, and the selected monster becomes that attribute for the turn. So, unlike Chemisterer, this is a continuous source of attribute manipulation, and with a defense like that, it might actually stand up to some battle too. It also lets you mess with your opponent's attributes for the turn for, you know, whatever that's worth. And it's a great piece of crossover media. I mean, look at all the subwoofers on this bad boy. This is clearly meant to be a reference to Speaker Man from the hit internet series Skibidi Toilet. And now, I've referenced Skibidi Toilet. Truly, I have hit rock bottom. Gen-X Ally Remote is a level 3 Dark Machine Tuner monster with 500 attack and 1800 defense, and once per turn you can select a face-up tuner monster on the field, and the selected monster's name is treated as Gen-X controller for the rest of the turn. That's right, any tuner. So if you're running anything from off theme, you can turn any of its tuners into a Gen-X tuner. The Gen-X tuner even. Though it can also target itself, which makes it a searchable controller for Power Planner to pick up. But I doubt any enemy is going to be intimidated by what amounts to a universal remote on legs. Hey, lore question, does this monster imply that the Duel Terminal world has televisions? Gen-X Ally Birdman is a level 3 Dark Machine Tuner monster with 1400 attack and 400 defense, and you can return a face-up monster you control to the hand to special summon this card from your hand, but banish it when it leaves the field. And if the returned monster is Wind attribute, Birdman gains 500 attack. This is one of the most competitively viable monsters in the archetype, and it's not even close. You get to swap out a monster on your field for a level 3 tuner, a very good level 4 tuners, and has the added bonus of recycling any on-summon effects. And bonus, it also makes for great rank 3 material, in which case it won't get banished. It was actually limited for this for quite some time for exactly that. But now we have it back to 3. Power creep truly is the force that keeps on giving. Expect to see this not only in Gen-X combo, but in combo in general. But please, for the love of God, please use the new alt art. It's too precious. Gen-X Ally Crusher is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn when a monster with the same attribute as this card is normal summoned to your field, you can select a card your opponent controls and destroy it. So as long as you're on a majority of dark monsters, you can get some pretty neat repeatable removal turn after turn. Especially if you can cheat this out in defense position so it's not getting run over by anything that just found out that attack stats can have a 4th digit. One might ask why you need to wait for a normal summon monster to lob one of these amazing grenades, but the truth is that it doesn't really have the arm strength to throw them very far, so it needs some help. Gen-X Ally Volcanon is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 1700 attack and 600 defense, and once per turn, you can send a face-up Fire Gen-X monster you control to the grave to select a face-up monster your opponent controls and destroy it, and burn your opponent for damage equal to the level of the destroyed monster times 400. So hey, you trade in something like an R-Genex Magma for removal and get some burn out of it. The only real issue here is, like with most of the Gen-X allies, most of your Gen-X monsters are not the attribute you need, so you're stuck relying on a small pool of specific ones or needing the attribute changers, which isn't very feasible. Which is a shame because they really outdid themselves with the design. With a visor like that, you could say that it's well done. Gen-X Ally Duradark is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 1800 attack and 200 defense, and once per turn during your main phase, you can select a face-up attack position monster your opponent controls with the same attribute as this card and destroy it, and this card can't attack the turn you activate this effect. I find myself really liking this card. Dark is a pretty popular attribute, so odds are you'll be able to find something for this to crunch. And if not, 1800 isn't a bad attack stat. Now, you can still use the attribute changers to give it a wider pool of targets, but at least it's starting off strong. And yes, I know it's doing the Biden blast, you all want me to say it. Except it's not. The Biden blast is characterized by a solid beam type attack, similar to your classic Kamehameha. What Duradark has is a curse popularized by Inuyasha's own lascivious monk Moroku, the Wind Tunnel. Thank you all for coming to my famous anime attack references in Yu-Gi-Oh! TED Talk. Gen X ally Bellflame is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 1700 attack and 1000 defense, and each time any number of monsters you control are sent to the grave, place a Gen X counter on this card. Each time any number of cards in your opponent's grave are banished, place 2 Gen X counters on this card. This card gains 100 attack for each Gen X counter on this card, and if this card is destroyed by a battle and sent to the grave, burn your opponent for 300 damage for each Gen X counter that was on this card. This is also a pretty interesting monster. The counter gaining effect isn't once per turn, so if you go on a big link play, or your opponent uses the grave as a resource to banish from, this gets pretty swole pretty quickly, and potentially deals a huge chunk of burn damage. Though, sadly, this is a destroyed by battle trigger, and it has to be sent to the grave specifically, so if macro is up, then no dice. But if you can force the destruction, you have a potentially game-winning amount of damage on your hands. But you can tell at this point that Justice was really running out of ideas. I don't want to call this a Volcanon palette swap, but after the second shoulder-mounted fire cannon, where do you go from there? Gen X ally Power Cell is a level 4 Dark Machine monster with 1700 attack and 0 defense, and other face-up monsters you control with the same attribute as this card gain 500 attack. And that ain't nothing. While attribute swappers can help you cover some niche monsters, you could just make sure your deck is made of dark monsters, and now you have an impressive attack boost on your hand for your whole field. And imagine what happens when you get multiple Power Cells on board. Now we're talking. This monster is more of a power line than a power cell, because that effect and armor design is really going to make them stand out. Gen X ally Reliever is a level 5 Dark Machine monster with 2200 attack and 1000 defense, and if you negate the activation of a spell card, trap card, or effect monster's effect activated by your opponent, you can special summon this card from your hand. Yeah, it's just a big free monster you can special summon. But see, what I love about this is Reliever was built primarily by the X-Sabers, and that archetype does have a counter trap, but guess what? It negates inherent summons, none of the things that are listed on Reliever. You'd have an easier time triggering this in Flamville using their counter trap card. And at this point, Naturia was starting to become a real big thing, and they're chock full of ways to negate card activations. Which means the big nature theme is better at using the Tin Man than the people who actually made it. A very embarrassing turn of events that the Circle of Druids will be gossiping about for months to come. Gen X ally Triarm is a level 6 Dark Machine Synchro monster with 2400 attack and 1600 defense, requiring Gen X controller and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. And this card's effects depend on the attribute of non-tuner synchro material used. Once per turn, you can discard a card to activate one of these effects. If you made Triarm using a Wind monster, you can send a random card from your opponent's hand to the grave, helping to polish off anything that Mist Valley might have bounced to their hand. If made with a Water, select a spell or trap card on the field and destroy it, following up with Ice Barrier's unexpected amount of back row hate. And if made with a Dark, select a face-up light monster on the field and destroy it and draw a card, carrying on the legacy of Ally of Justice Field Marshal. So while this monster has one of our more forgiving synchro material requirements, the fact that it only gains effects depending on the non-tuner material means you still have to play around the mechanic. And even though it works with 3 of the 6 attributes, the effect still needs to line up against the kind of deck you're battling. Destroying a light monster isn't going to be as effective against the Trap Tricks deck as back row removal would be after all. Still, it's nice to see them giving it the old college try. I too agree that one of the best ways to improve your forces is by adding in knockoff Mega Mans. Wait, I made a second Mega Man reference in a single video? I'm literally just coming to this realization. What the heck? Gen X ally Triforce is a level 7 Dark Machine Synchro monster with 2500 attack and 2100 defense, making this, mechanically, the protagonist monster of Duel Terminal. It requires any Gen X tuner monster and one or more non-tuner monsters as material, and like Triarm, has 3 effects based on the attributes of non-tuner material used for it. If you made it with Earth, if this card attacks, your opponent can't activate spell or trap cards until the end of the damage step, which has a lot of ancient gear flavor for an effect that's meant to emulate X-Sabers. If made with Fire, if this card destroys a monster by battle, burn them for damage equal to the attack of the destroyed monster, which is very in line with Flamvell, but Because of the ancient gear comparison, all I can think of now is Elemental Hero Flame Wingman, and if made with light, once per turn, you can select a light monster in your grave and special summon it in face down defense position. Now this one is free of GX comparisons, at least I think it is, but it still doesn't tie in with Justice, but rather their nemesis, the Worms. However, it could be a nod towards Justice's unethical experiments, which included trying to use the Worms' biology and incorporate that into their machines. This makes for a pretty sweet attacker, and while it still suffers from only working when you have the right attributes loaded into it, the ones it can get make for a strong bruiser in combat, and if you randomly have some light monsters you want to get back, the free +1 ain't bad. And if the connections to the Worms gets under your skin, just pretend you're instead wielding the power of the Triforce. I mean, the card itself is already trying to make that comparison, so why deny it? Gen X ally Axel is a level 8 Dark Machine Synchro monster with 2600 attack and 2000 defense, requiring a Gen X tuner monster and one or more non-tuner monsters as material. Once per turn, you can discard a card to select a level 4 or lower machine monster from your grave and special summon it. The attack of that monster is doubled until the end phase, but it can't attack your opponent directly, and remove that monster from play during your end phase. This has got to be one of our best synchro monsters that we have access to. It doesn't need a specific attribute for the non-tuner material, it doesn't even base its effects off of having a particular attribute for your non-tuner material. But we don't have a single level 4 Gen X tuner monster, at least outside of our Undyne now. So in any other case, we will have to rely on higher leveled non-tuner material to make this work. But as long as we're on a mostly machine deck, we can turn a card in our hand into any of our smaller machines, and the best part is that their effects are not negated. You get the full value out of them, and they turn into gigantic beat sticks. And all you have to do to ensure they don't get banished is use them for something else before the end phase rolls around, and that's never been easier. You could revive a level 2 tuner and put it together with Axel to make Barone. Grab a level 1 tuner, and that makes Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss. Or you could take anything you revive and smash it together with Axel to make SP Little Knight with the removal effect. This card is actually kinda wild, and I look forward to seeing what this new wave of Gen X support will do to take this over the top. Or should I say, over the top clear mind. That's right, Gen X ally Axel is the most duelist monster of all times. Check it out, it's even got a sweet looking dual disc and is about to rip the fattest lightning storm off the top. It's so cool. That about does it for the Gen X monsters. Now it's time for some combo knowledge, brought to you by the genius of Gen X, the master of Mate himself, Darth Nash. Take it away.
Hello all of Nova's beautiful dudes and dudettes. This is Darth Nash 6 here, and Nova has asked me if I can show you guys some cool combos. Excuse me. If I can show you guys some cool combos on, you know, what you can do with the new Gen X cards. Of course, I've got my handy yerba mate here that I've been drinking to help prepare me for this. Now, before we get into this, I need to let you guys know that I am running some sort of pseudo proxies to keep you guys, you know, in mind of what these cards are when I am playing them. So first of all, we're going to start off with this Atlantean Dragoons right here is R-Genex Undyne. I've chosen R-Genex Undyne. I've chosen this because it is a water level 4, which is exactly what R-Genex Undyne is. So when you see this, just know that this is R-Genex Undyne. Next up, we've got, oh, where is it? Christian Sitri. Christian Sitri is just the new R-Genex Oracle card. I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but we're just keeping this here right now for you guys. And then in the extra deck, we've got Ally of Justice Decisive Armor is Arms of Gen X Return 0, because it is, technically. And then we've got Linkuriboh here in place of Repair Gen X Controller. So let's hop into the first combo here, which just starts with Gen X Power Planner. Just the existence of that. You're going to normal summon Gen X Power Planner, which on normal summon will add a level 3. So you're going to add Gen X Ally Birdman. He's the level 3. This little guy, this little dude, is the level 3 that everybody knows and loves. And a lot of people actually hate for good reason. But we're going to link that away into Repair Gen X Controller. Remember that Linkuriboh is a Repair Gen X Controller, not a Linkuriboh. If you see a Linkuriboh, that means you're actually in love with me. So, on normal summon, what this is, not normal summon, sorry, on link summon, what this is going to do is add a Gen-X monster from grave to hand. Now what's crazy is that it doesn't target, so keep that in mind if you want to build this with a competitive mindset. It can dodge DD Crow. Of course, if Power Planner is the only card in your grave, it can't really dodge DD Crow since they're, they're just going to DD Crow it, but whatever. So boom, you have added a Gen-X monster to your hand. You know what that means? According to Repair Gen-X Controller, you are allowed to normal summon a Gen-X monster. So we're just gonna normal summon Power Planner again. And what's Power Planner gonna do on normal summon? Add a level 3 Gen-X, which is R-Genex Magma. Now, since we have added R-Genex Magma to hand, we are going to normal summon R-Genex Magma, which on normal summon is gonna let us add a level 2 R-Genex Crusher. So R-Genex Crusher, we're going to normal summon, and what's that going to do on normal summon? You got it. It's going to add a level 4 R-Genex, which is R-Genex Turbo. Now, holy cow. Check this out. We've got a Gen-X monster that's been added to hand. So what are we going to do? We're going to normal summon it. So R-Genex Turbo on normal summon is going to add a level 1. What's that level 1 going to be? R-Genex Oracle. R-Genex Oracle has been added to hand, so that's immediately just going to let it special summon itself. And boom, we have a tuner. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Holy cow. All right, so let's count it. Let's see how many stars we have. We've got 11. So we are going to synchro these away into not decisive armor, but Arms of Gen-X Return 0. We can't go into Baron right here because R-Genex Oracle can only be used for the synchro summon of a Gen-X monster, but that's okay because Arms of Gen-X Return 0 is a hefty negate, a large, hefty boy who's going to, well, I don't know, it's a giant android, but that's okay. It's a war machine, not Marvel War Machine. So, right now, we've got this guy on the field. We are going to finally use Gen-X Ally Birdman, bounce Power Planner to hand to special summon. Holy cow! We've added a Gen-X monster to our hand, so that's going to let us normal summon. We're going to normal summon Power Planner, which is going to add a level 3 Gen-X effect monster, Gen-X Undyne. Gen-X Undyne has been added to our hand, so what's that going to do? It's going to let us get a normal summon. And so we're going to normal summon Gen-X Undyne. Gen-X Undyne for cost is going to send not Atlantean Dragoons, but our Gen-X Undyne so that it can add Gen-X Controller to the hand. And holy cow, we've had a Gen-X monster added to our hand. So what's that going to do? That's going to let us normal summon. Whoa, normal summon, that's so crazy. It's like that's what the deck keeps on doing. Okay, so what we've got right here is we've got some tuners on field. So we're going to synchro now into a 6. Now this is something that not a lot of people have been seeing, but it goes lore-wise. So you've noticed that Gen-X Undyne is a non-tuner water monster, which fulfills the requirement for Duloran, Tiger King of the Ice Barrier, another monster in the Duel Terminal series. Now what's cool about Gen-X is how it lets us use all of these other monsters from the Duel Terminal world, very similar, in my opinion, to the Vsauce storyline, how you can, mix and match a lot of those decks together. I think that's really, really cool about what this new Gen-X support allows. Okay, so we've got Duloran on field. Duloran on field on its summon, well, just once per turn, it's going to bounce as many face-up cards of control to the owner's hand. So we're going to bounce Gen-X Power Planner. Boom! Oh my goodness. We've had a Gen-X monster added to hand. So what are we going to do with that? We are going to normal summon. And on normal summon of Power Planner, we're going to add a Gen-X monster, R-Genex Magma, specifically as our next level 3. So remember, Power Planner is pretty important because it lets us add 3 different Gen-X names from deck to hand. Now, we've had a Gen-X monster added to hand, so what does that mean? That means we get to normal summon. So R-Genex Magma has been normal summoned, so we're going to add the new R-Genex Oracle. I forgot its name off the top of my head, but it's like the yellow Gen-X Oracle. So we're going to add that to our hand. Okay, so we've got some monsters right here. We are going to synchro summon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going to synchro 7. Sorry, I thought my ancient fairy dragon was here with me. It is not. Okay, so we're going to synchro 7 into ancient fairy dragon. Now, why are we going into ancient fairy dragon? It doesn't, you know, let us really do anything. We don't have a field spell. But you seem to forget Ancient Fairy Dragon's other effect, which it lets us summon a level 4 lower monster. So we're going to summon the Turning, R-Genex Turning. R-Genex Turning is a level 2. It's a level 2 tuner. We're going to tune these two together into a level 8 Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon, which on summon is going to let us bring back our R-Genex Turning. From there, we are going to... Forgot that Birdman needs to be banished. We are going to synchro into Disbatter. Whoa, that's so crazy. Oh my goodness, level 10. That can bring back that Genex ally Birdman that was banished once it was used for a synchro. Holy cow. Now, boom, we've got Baron. Okay, so we have Bestial Dispatter, Baron, and Arms of Genex Return 0. But the problem is, Arms of Genex Return 0 and Disbatter don't really do anything if we don't have anything banished. So, we're going to have to remedy that. We're going to now use R-Genex Undyne to bring it and Turbo to hand. So this means now that all of our monsters are going to be banished now, or any card that's sent to the grave is going to be banished for the rest of the turn. But boom, we have added Genex monsters to our hand, which allows us to normal summon once again. So what are we going to summon? We are going to normal summon Turbo. Turbo is going to let us add Power Planner, one of the most important ones once again. So we've added a Genex monster, which allows us to normal summon a Genex monster. So we're going to summon Undyne. Undyne is going to banish Genex Controller so that it becomes a Dark Tuner. So what are we going to do with that? We are now going to synchro into Dragite. Dragite gives us a spell Trap Negate. Since we have 2 waters in grave, we've got R-Genex Undyne. We've got more than 2. We've got Undyne, we've got Duloran, so we're set on that. We've got a Banish, we've got a Dark Negate. We can shuffle this back if we need to destroy something. This is a sizable board, and we've got follow-up for next turn. So we got an Omni Negate, a Spell Trap Negate, we've got a Monster Destruction, and we've got a Dark Effect Negate. We are pretty set on this field, and remember, that was all from just one Genex Power Planner. So let's go into another combo.
Okay, just a couple of things to mention while we get the next clip loaded up here. There are a couple of discrepancies going on here, namely that the R-Genex Undyne and the Turbo should be banished, but that doesn't actually change the effectiveness of the board. It's actually even better. See, Nash was saying that the Return 0 is a Dark Monster Negate. No. It is every Monster Negate. See, because we did that whole rigmarole of going through all the Genex Searchers, we have a Light, Wind, Earth, and Fire all in the graveyard, with Turning being a Dark, and Undyne being the Water. So, outside of a Divine monster showing up, we actually have everything we need in that regard, which is pretty spiffy. It also means that if our opponent has set any spells or trapped cards before the end of our turn, we can use Return 0 to return those 3 banished monsters to pop up to 3 of them. Sadly, Labyrinth is quick speed, so they'll just do it during the end phase, but it's the thought that counts. Anyway, that should do it. Let's go ahead and get this other one going.
This combo builds us exactly the same board as last time, but instead with the normal summon of R-Genex Crusher instead of Genex Power Planner. So we're going to normal summon R-Genex Crusher, which on normal summon will let us add a level 4 R-Genex monster specifically. So you can't add like any level 4 Genex. It's got to be an R-Genex. You can add R-Genex Turbo or R-Genex Undyne, but we're going to add R-Genex Turbo. We're going to link Crusher away, into Repair Genex Controller. On Link Summon, we're going to add R-Genex Crusher back to our hand, and holy cow, would you look at that, a Genex monster has been added to our hand, allowing us to normal summon a Genex. R-Genex Turbo on summon is going to add Genex Power Planner from deck to hand. And holy cow, we've had a Genex monster added to our hand, so we're going to normal summon Genex Power Planner. Genex Power Planner on normal summon is going to add Genex Ally Birdman. We've got a tuner in works. What are we going to do there? So we're allowed another normal summon, of course, so we're going to normal summon again R-Genex Crusher, which is going to add a level 4. Holy cow, Turbo! Once again, you shouldn't have. Now, since we've added a Genex monster to hand, we're going to normal summon once again. So R-Genex Turbo will add a level 1 Genex, and what are we going to do? R-Genex Oracle. R-Genex Oracle, if it is added to hand by the effect of a Genex monster, boom, it immediately just special summons itself. Ain't that neat? I like to think so. Personally, my own opinion. So, boom, all of these levels right here, what are we going to do with them? We're going to synchro everything but Crusher away into, drum roll please, nah, I'm just kidding, you don't have to do the drum roll, into Arms of Genex Return 0. Now, remember, Arms of Genex Return 0 can target up to 6 of your banished Genex monsters with different attributes that are banished. You can shuffle, or that are in the grave, shuffle them all into the deck and then destroy that many cards. But the big thing is that you can banish a monster from your grave with the same attribute as that monster to negate a monster effect. So you want to load up the grave, with as many different attributes as possible so that you can just keep on negating stuff. So what are we going to do here? Obviously, we're going to bounce R-Genex Crusher to hand to special summon Genex Ally Birdman. Holy cow, look at that. A Genex monster has been added to hand. So what are we going to do? We're going to normal summon. So R-Genex Crusher on summon's going to add a level 4 R-Genex. Turbo again. Holy cow. So we've added Turbo to hand. You know what that means? We get another normal summon. R-Genex Turbo on summon is going to add a level 1. We're going to add the good, the useful, the trusty Power Planner that you saw in the first combo. We're going to add that to hand, and holy cow, we're going to normal summon. That's right, folks. You saw it here first. That's what we're going to do, and on normal summon of Power Planner, we're going to add a level 3, our trusty, our rusty I'm tripping up over my words. Genex Ally Birdman. Okay, now what we're going to do is synchro for 7. You haven't seen this guy before. F8 Dawn Dragster. Okay, we've got Birdman in hand, so we're going to bounce Power Planner to hand to special summon, and holy cow, we've just added a Genex monster to our hand. So what are we going to do? We're going to normal summon Power Planner. So Power Planner has been summoned. That means we're going to add a level 3 Genex effect monster. So what are we going to do now? Well, we're just going to synchro into, holy cow, was that a level 10? Baron de Fleur. Okay, but what are we going to do now? We need a way to add a Genex monster to hand. Oh my goodness. We've got Birdman. But we need to clear up our field a bit. So we're just going to use Baron to pop Controller right here. Goodbye, Controller. So sorry. So we're going to now bounce Power Planner to hand to special summon Birdman. And holy cow, we just added a Genex monster to hand. So we're going to normal summon it. And what are we going to do? We're going to add a level 3 effect monster. Is that Genex Undyne herself? What a queen. Slay girl. And we've added a Genex monster to hand. So what are we going to do? We're going to normal summon. So Genex Undyne on summon for cost, it's going to send a water monster. And what are we going to send? Not Atlantean Dragoons, you goofballs. Remember, this is a proxy for R-Genex Undyne to add Genex Controller. But what are we going to do now with all of this? I just don't know. I think the best thing to do in this situation is synchro into a level 7. Of course. And what better level 7 than the one that's just going to let us summon some more? We're going to special summon this Genex Controller, and we've got a dragon and a non-dragon tuner. We're going to synchro into Dispatter. So we've got these 3 level 10s. What are we going to do now? Well, we're going to use Dragoon's effect. Not Dragoon. Oh my gosh, I just got myself. We're going to use R-Genex Undyne to add itself and Turbo to hand, just like the last combo. Because you just gotta wait. So we've normal summoned. What does that mean? Well, we've added Genex Monsters to the hand. So what does that mean? That means we're going to normal summon. R-Genex Turbo on summon is going to add Power Planner to hand, and oh my goodness, we're just going to normal summon once again. So Dragoons, what it's going to do is it's just going to banish. Honestly, you can really banish anything as long as it's a tuner. Genex Controller is on top, so we'll just banish Genex Controller. Dragoons is now a Dark Tuner, so we're going to Synchro for 8 into Dragite. So we've got the same exact board as last time with Power Planner in hand for follow-up. So that right there for you guys were 2 combos with 2 of the monsters that add to hand upon normal summon. You can really get that board with any of the 4 monsters. Remember, you've got Power Planner, Crusher, Magma, and Turbo. What's cool is that you don't even need to limit yourself to those. This right here, this pile of cards, is actually a modified version of a deck in the OCG that just won a tournament. And looking at the deck list, I could see that the deck was a hand rip deck. They used Trishula, Gothams, and Omega, and then Disbatter to bring Omega back to be able to rip the opponent's entire board. I haven't exactly figured out the combo lines for that, but just know that it is possible to turn this deck into just a, banish your opponent's entire hand, which I think is really cool. I know that it's really scummy, but I love when decks, especially decks like Genex, can do that. Like, I took X-Sabers to a YCS recently with the sole goal of ripping my opponent's hand with Gothams. So I love when decks can do hand rips like this, and the fact that, this Genex deck can do it with Trish, Gothams, and Omega, and do it pretty consistently is pretty cool. So please follow along to Genex and stick around. This deck is going to make waves. I 100% can guarantee it. So let's turn the time right back over to our Lord, Savior, and Master, GoldenNova. Take it away.
Incredible. Big thanks once again to Nash for showing off his forbidden knowledge. Make sure you go check him out. Link should be in the top right of the screen and in the description. If you like what we do here, you're gonna love what he does over there. He loves Duel Terminal basically as much as I do. Heck, maybe even more so. This guy actually takes these cards to real modern events. Alright, so that's all the Genex cards, but what do we do with them? Well, nowadays, we're pretty clearly going to be focusing on utilizing Repair Genex Controller as much as possible. There really isn't a focused game plan outside of that, so we're looking to find as many ways to get into our loop as possible, reactivating that loop as many times as possible so we can make as many powerful synchros as possible, and insulate our plays so we can accomplish this task consistently. Then we just use the controlling effects of our synchros combined with their massive attack stats to close things out. Easy as that. Though I do want to try and find some things we can use to help smooth over the wrinkles between our 3 sub-archetypes, just in case you find yourself in pre-repaired Genex Controller times. So what can we play to help them out? We'll need as many effects as possible that add Genex monsters to your hand. Gear Gigant X is a saint when it comes to grabbing our machines from our deck or graveyard, but as an Xyz, it's not exactly a flexible option. Remember, when we use the loop, we can no longer access anything except synchro monsters using Genex tuners as material, which means we can't make a Gear Gigant afterwards to restart the loop. We'll have to save it for a plan B on a follow-up turn when we're not under that restriction. Ancient Gear Box is kind of similar, triggering that off of Gear Gigant X as well as Ancient Gear Ballista, but we don't exactly have a lot of Earth Machine monsters, and the search pool for that is a lot more limited. You'll want to focus on using the synchro monsters that you can already make, or spells and traps. And when it comes to those synchros, no one's better at it than Super Heavy Samurai Sword Master Musashi, because it's not once per turn, so you can load up your extra deck with a lot of these, synchro summon for them as needed, is itself synchro non-tuner material to help with your synchro climbing, and grabs you back a Genex so you can go to town. Just be careful. Remember that because it's a super heavy samurai, it does put a restriction on your spell and trap card usage. If there are any in your grave, you're not going to be able to summon the monster you add back or use its effect. That doesn't necessarily stop you, as you don't have to normal summon the Genex that you add back to hand, but if you need it for another loop, you might want to think of a different plan. Oh, and also, the only members of the loop you can get back are Crusher and Turbo, so be wary of that when it comes to sequencing out your plays. As mentioned previously, monster reincarnation is also a nice option. Going -1 isn't a huge deal if it means getting your loop started up again. And because one of our monsters is Pyro, we can take advantage of the new search spell, Bonfire. If there are any magmas left in your deck, you can scoop it up lickety-split, which means not only does this restart our loop, we can actually use this to get the whole process started as well. Pot of Avarice is also going to be one of our best friends. Because our loop involves churning out so many monsters, we'll need help from this classic card to recycle them, while also filling our grip with more extenders and enablers. Repaired is a very powerful monster, but even it has its limits when it comes to how much it can do. We only have 5 main monster zones to work with after all. Having a way to condense our monsters into our synchros while performing the loop is gonna give us even more material we can work with in the long run. Sadly, most quick sync effects only operate during our opponent's turn, and while we can set things up to begin the loop on our opponent's turn, thus enabling those effects, I want to see what we can do during our own turn. And thankfully, Burning Soul is here to help. It lets you perform a quick sync once you get to a level 8 or higher synchro monster, so this is only going to work once you get to your second loop during your first turn, but it also acts as a way to start a loop, because it grabs a card out of your graveyard and puts it into your hand, and the card that you grab can be one of your Genex, so it's a very good multi-purpose card in that regard. In a similar vein, Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon can perform a quick sync during your main phase, and that's an effect that just lives in your extra deck. Heck, it even gives you back a level 2 tuner that you might have used, and that combos really well with Overseer as a way to turbo out even more Genex from your hand, or getting Turing on board, a very flexible tuner in terms of levels. Return 0 is going to be a very prominent monster moving forward, but as stated, sometimes it's hard to match up the attributes in gray with what your opponent might have. And that's where the Element Sabers come in. If you can jam a few into the graveyard, you can preemptively swap them to an attribute of a monster you think is going to be a problem. Now, sadly, those attributes will revert back to their original ones during the end phase, which means you're not going to be able to use it during your opponent's turn. Rather, this should be thought of as a way to deal with hand traps like Nibiru, Ash, and Gamma, or as a way to combat monsters already on their field with quick effects. As for a silly tech pick, I don't know a lot of cards that can help out our attribute matters issues. DNA Transplant can change the entire field, sure, but it's rigid, so once you make a decision, we can't swap it off for anything else. So if we choose Fire to help out Volcanon, we can't choose Water to help out Solid. What the deck really needs is some kind of repeatable way of changing, or at least bestowing, attributes, and it turns out we have the perfect candidate in RGB Rainbow Lucian. You can use it every turn, turns the monster into a machine, which isn't a huge issue, most of them already are and won't affect our rocks and spellcasters, and gives the monster every attribute in the game, except Divine because the developers are cowards. That way you can use it for all kinds of effects. It becomes valid non-tuner material for every Genex Synchro. It can provide all the effects for Tri-Arm and Triforce. It can even be used with our Genex allies that require specific attributes for their effect. It's slow, it's clunky, and very janky, which means it fits right at home with us. Alright, that's all the info I have on Genex, but how do they measure up against the N.O.V.A scale? Novelty. Before Genex, there were cards that tried to make attributes matter, most notably the element cycle of monsters, but I don't think the concept was ever as front of mind as it was with Genex. At all stages of the game, it's very clear to see that the designers wanted to use attributes as a way to section them off into pieces that could be used either together or with their associated tribe. Or at least, I feel that it's clear. I can't really get into the designers' heads. After all, Blast Fan reads like it was made to be the payoff for Divine Wind of Mist Valley, but Furnace doesn't at all read like a Flamvel card. Then we have the other half of the deck that just wants to focus on Genex Controller itself. So while there was a lot of effort put into the playstyle, it's not very coherent, nor did it lead to a lot of timeless synergies that other themes would build off of in the future. So Genex get a 2 in novelty from me. Objectivity. Well, if you'd caught me before the latest wave of support, you might have seen me give this a 5, considering it's a theme that could never have any level of competitive viability, with only a few of its components seeing tournament play in other decks. Now, with Repaired Controller and Return 0 on the market, we may have ourselves a little bit of a problem. I still feel like the deck has multiple weak points, its startup doesn't have a lot of protection, but once it snowballs hard, gaining access not only to a wealth of powerful synchros, but also eating up time in the round because of how often your opponent will be sifting through their deck for the loop, to say nothing of what's going to happen in Master Duel once these drop there. So I'm awarding Genex a 4 in objectivity. Versatility. As stated previously, there are some cards that have stood the test of time. Undyne, Birdman, Neutron, and now Return Zero. We have small pockets of very powerful cards, and they work in a ton of different decks. That doesn't mean it's going to get a high number, but to act like it doesn't play well with others would be disingenuous, so I'm giving GenX a 3 in versatility. Awesomeness. The subjective nature of this category rears its ugly head once again, because I just do not like GenX. Beforehand, I felt like it was a pile of missed potential, reaching to make an attribute-centric deck and stumbling horridly. And the new cards feel like a complete departure from that design ethos, instead tunneling in on a group of cards that just enable a big swarm strategy, with the only real nod towards the Archetypes history being Return Zero's attribute negation restriction, and I guess a little bit of R-Genex Undyne. It's done a good job of making the core playable, but in terms of flavor, it feels like a complete failure, much like its original incarnations. So I'll be giving GenX a 1 in awesomeness, which means the Stewards of Duel Terminal walk away with a 10 on the N.O.V.A scale. And that's all I have to say about GenX. I know I've come down hard on these little goobers, but I am happy for all those excited to see their new friends get a fresh coat of paint. And if these are the kinds of updates we can expect from Terminal World packs moving forward, I'm more than happy for GenX to be part of the first wave. Now, for the love of God, can you please get some kind of Mud Dragon of the Swamp effect so your attribute stuff works better? But now, I want to hear what you all have to say. Are GenX the next best thing to happen to the game, or are they Gen next in line for thrashing? And which one's your favorite? Honestly, Solar's pretty cool. I'd pilot that mech any day. Let me know your favorites down below, and if you haven't already, please make sure to like the video, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and share this video with somebody you know who loves Yu-Gi-Oh! It really does a lot to help me out. Today's episode is brought to you by my lovely patrons, as well as the wonderful people over at Dragon Shield. Get the sleeves as strong as dragon scales and save 5% on your order by using coupon code GoldenNova at checkout. Today's episode was also brought to you by my lovely patrons, including this month's illustrious Quasar Commanders Frankie and Marluxia is a Girl, Nebula Navigators 3rd Dynasty, Ada Basilisk, Adam Zajdel, Andrew Newman, Kane Senpai, Chibi Gohan, Christopher Fuss, Clockswork, Dark Dragon X830, EmonyChan, Eric, Aaron the World Breaker, Garland Chaos, Genesis Yu-Gi-Oh, Green Knight, Great Big Pillock, Hairbear, Harry the Ominous Benefactor, Howling Zangetsu, Hydrocraft 135, Iron Zero, Iskander 711, Mana Charge, Marion James E. Picata, Mega Combi, Millennia Asta, Muzuki Clark, Nathan Vig, Natiel Lee Alexander, Orozco 09096, Panther J, Rebel King Lucifer, Red Eyes Jackalow, RJ the Jank Monarch, Sammy Haim, Serenity Towns, Sir Knight JCB, Sim Antares, The Wizard Moose, URTV 667 and Xander Wolfensberger, Cosmic Crusaders Alpha Sly, Almento 5010, A Random Pup, Ariel Kersey, Beluga Masta, Blitzwolf, Blue Gem, Borger with a Shotgun, Chaz Ghost, Corbinisms, Danny Bound, Dr. Reaper RIP, Drachenwald, Eki Bullock, Eva Padilla, Hike Boyagian, Herbal D, Inblink, Jester Designs, Kale the Dragon, Carp, Kevon Public, King Scarlet Yu-Gi-Oh, Lemon Yu-Gi-Oh, Lord Whoop-De-Doo, Manga Pages, Matt Simmons, Mick Spoofy, Michael Shimabukuro, Mustafa Aiden, Nitromo, Shizuki Nijimura, Sophie, apparently, Stephen Williamson, Taylor Seymour, the legendary Raven, and Zaldreka, as well as the lovely Starlight Explorers you see on screen now. If you'd like to help me in my journey to cover all of Yu-Gi-Oh's archetypes, get my videos early, be a part of these credits, and many other awesome perks, it would mean the world to me if you checked out the link to my Patreon in the description or consider joining as a YouTube member. And if you'd like to learn more about the GenX and their role in the story, check out this playlist of the living lore of the Duel Terminal. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.